Happy New Year! And not only that, Happy Public Domain Day. Every year on the 1st of January, a whole new batch of published works enters the public domain, meaning those works are no longer subject to copyright laws and are free for the public to use as we see fit, no license needed, no permission necessary. Public domain work is art that belongs to the people. It's a beautiful thing. Copyright laws vary from country to country, of course. I am not an expert on the subject, not even close. What I do know is that here in the United States, under present law, works that were first published in the U.S. before 1978 become public domain after 95 years. There are some exceptions to this, and I'll talk about one of them in a few minutes, but generally speaking, here in the U.S., works become public domain 95 years after first publication. That means, as of today, January 1st, 2024, works first published in the U.S. in 1928 are in the public domain. Some of the more notable books entering the public domain in the U.S. as of today are A.A. Milne's second and final book of stories featuring Winnie the Pooh, The House at Pooh Corner. It includes the introduction of the character of Tigger, which means that Tigger is available to appear in the sequel to Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, which I'm sure will be great. I bet Tigger was the missing piece. Also in the public domain as of today, the 11th Tarzan novel by Edgar Rice Burroughs, Tarzan, Lord of the Jungle, Agatha Christie's 6th Hercule Poirot novel, The Mystery of the Blue Train, Lady Chatterley's Lover by D.H. Lawrence. I haven't read it, but I hear it's filthy. I should read it. And J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan, or The Boy Who Wouldn't Grow Up. Now, about that last one, it's a somewhat interesting case and an example of how complicated copyright law can get. Peter Pan has been partially in the public domain in the U.S. for years because J.M. Barrie's novel, Peter and Wendy, was first published in 1911. Peter Pan, or The Boy Who Wouldn't Grow Up, is Barrie's original play, which was first produced in London in 1904 and in New York in 1905. So why is it only entering the public domain now? Because even though the play was first produced in the early 1900s, the script wasn't published until 1928. Two more Pan-related notes. First, this is the original J.M. Barrie play I'm referring to, not the Broadway musical that you're probably familiar with, the one where Mary Martin played Peter and Cyril Ritchard played Captain Hook. A few years ago, they did it live on TV with Allison Williams as Peter and Christopher Walken as Hook. Anyway, that version was first produced in 1954, and it is still very much under copyright. Second, as I said at the beginning, this video is only about the public domain in the United States. In the United Kingdom, things are a little different. In 1929, J.M. Barrie gave the copyright to Peter Pan to the Great Ormond Street Hospital in London. The original copyright has since expired, but in 1988, Parliament passed a major update to UK copyright law that included a provision granting the Great Ormond Street Hospital royalties from any performance or publication of the original play or of any work adapted from it. The law only guarantees the Great Ormond Street Hospital the royalty, though the full copyright is still expired. That means the hospital can't control who uses the play or how it's used, just that anyone who does use it needs to pay the hospital a royalty. And that royalty never expires, meaning barring a change in the law, Peter Pan will remain under partial copyright in the UK forever. Books published in 1928 aren't the only works entering public domain as of today. There are also quite a few songs you've probably heard. But here's where we arrive at that exception I referred to earlier. Songs first published in 1928 are now public domain, but it's only the songs as written. The sheet music, basically. Any records made in 1928 are still under copyright for another 5 years. This is because in 2018, Congress passed the Music Modernization Act, which declared all sound recordings published before January 1st, 1923 would become public domain on January 1st, 2022, and for each subsequent year from 2023 to 2046, sound recordings would enter the public domain 100 years after their first publication. So, sound recordings from 1928 won't be public domain until January 1st, 2029. But sound recordings from 1923 are public domain as of today. That includes records by blues legends Ida Cox, Bessie Smith, and Ma Rainey, and a recording of Charleston by its composer James P. Johnson. Incidentally, the Library of Congress maintains a website with a database of public domain sound recordings, including tons of music, all free to download and use as you see fit. The site is called the National Jukebox, and there's a link to it in the description. As for published music and lyrics from 1928, there are some real classics that are now in the public domain. Again, these aren't recordings, so I can't play you records of these songs without getting a copyright clearance. However, I can sing them for you. When You're Smiling, lyrics by Mark Fisher and Joe Goodwin, music by Larry Shea. This one's been recorded by legends like Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Louis Armstrong, and Louis Prima, all of whom made it sound a whole lot better than this. When you're smiling, the whole world smiles with you. When you're laughing, the sun comes shining through. But when you're crying, you bring on the rain. So stop that crying, be happy again, keep on smiling. 'Cause when you're smiling, the whole world smiles with you. How about I Can't Give You Anything But Love, Baby? Lyrics by Dorothy Fields, music by Jimmy McHugh. Well, I can't give you anything but love, baby. That's the only thing I've plenty of. Baby, you dream a while and you scheme a while. You're sure to find happiness, and I guess all the things you think are fine. When Tony Bennett and Lady Gaga recorded that one like 10 years ago, somebody had to pay a license fee, but not me, baby. The fat stacks of ad revenue I'm gonna earn on this video will be pure profit. There are other songs you'd probably know. I Want to Be Loved by You, with lyrics by Burt Kalmar and music by Harry Ruby and Herbert Stothert. The song made famous by Helen Kane, whom Fleischer Studios allegedly ripped off when they created Betty Boop. And Makin' Whoopee, with lyrics by Gus Kahn and music by Walter Donaldson, the song that introduced the phrase Makin' Whoopee as a euphemism for fucking, although it actually tells the story of a marriage, from wedding and honeymoon, to children, to disillusionment, infidelity, and the brink of divorce. And Mac the Knife, music by Kurt Weill and lyrics by Bertolt Brecht, but only the original German version. I will spare you having to listen to me sing any of those. There is one more, though, and if you will indulge me, it goes a little something like this. In the Big Rock Candy Mountains, the jails are made of tin, and you can walk right out again as soon as you are in. There ain't no short-handle shovels, no axes, saws, or picks. I'm a-goin' to stay where you sleep all day, where they hung the jerk that invented work in the Big Rock Candy Mountains. That's just my favorite verse. I won't sing the whole thing, though I'm sorely tempted because I love that song. The Big Rock Candy Mountains, music and lyrics by Harry McClintock. Last but not least, there are a whole bunch of excellent and historically significant films from 1928 that are now in the public domain. Here is but a sampling. Lights of New York, directed by Brian Foy, promoted as the first all-talking picture. The year before, The Jazz Singer had been the first talkie, that is, the first feature-length motion picture with synchronized music and dialogue, but we only see and hear the characters talking in brief sequences that make up a fraction of the film's runtime. Much of The Jazz Singer plays like a conventional silent film. Lights of New York, however, features synchronized dialogue from start to finish.
That thing makes me homesick for Broadway. Here we've been stuck in this pint-sized town for nearly a month. It's enough to drive a guy goofy.
So where you been all day? I've been waiting for you. Look, there's a kiss from Cinderella.
From who?
It's from Scanlon, and we're okay. The bootleg rap against us has been dropped, and we can go back to the big town tomorrow.
It's less than an hour long and was considered a B movie by the studio, not terribly expensive despite being a talking picture, and the reviews when it came out were not great, but the all-talking gimmick was enough to bring in the crowds, and the movie wound up grossing $1.25 million off of a $29,000 budget. Not bad. The film is largely forgotten today, but it's an important milestone in movie history nonetheless. And now you can download it for free from the Internet Archive, where I'm sure a copy is either already available or will be very soon, and watch it and do whatever the hell else you want with it. The Man Who Laughs, directed by Paul Lenny and starring Conrad Veidt as the son of a disgraced English lord who grows up to become a traveling actor and rediscover his lost noble heritage. The subject matter is pure melodrama, but the visuals are pure German expressionism. Paul Lenny and Conrad Veidt were both important figures in that movement, Lenny having previously directed Waxworks in his native Germany and The Cat and the Canary for Universal here in the States. That one is a German expressionist comedy, and Veidt having starred in some of the most notable German expressionist films, including Lenny's Waxworks, and perhaps the most important film in the movement, Robert Wien's The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. These days, The Man Who Laughs is probably best remembered for what it inspired. If you've seen the film, or are at least somewhat familiar with it, you know what I'm talking about. If not, let me just tell you that there is a particular detail about Conrad Veidt's character in the film that I haven't mentioned yet. He is disfigured. His face is frozen in a permanent smile. 12 years after the film's initial release, in 1940, Bob Kane, Bill Finger, and Jerry Robinson, though I'm betting it was mostly Bill Finger and Jerry Robinson, just a hunch, used Veidt's appearance in The Man Who Laughs as inspiration for the look of the Joker, who would soon become the arch nemesis of Batman and one of the prototypical supervillains. So just to recap, that guy's not public domain, but that guy is. The Crowd, directed by King Vidor, tells the story of a young married couple living in New York City, struggling with money, family troubles, and growing dissatisfaction in their marriage. Like The Man Who Laughs, the plot is melodrama, and the visuals are the real reason to see the movie. Vidor and his cinematographer, Henry Sharp, create one of the most beautifully shot films of the era, blending footage of real New York streets with shots of scale models and sets, using the visuals to not only move the plot along, but to impart meaning and theme, as in this famous shot where the camera tracks up along the exterior of the massive office building and the precisely regular squares of the windows give way to an endless plane of precisely regular desks in the interior. The Crowd is also notable for being a film about ordinary people. Its heroes aren't adventure heroes or members of the nobility or wealthy business tycoons. They're a family of typical working-class people. Their problems, though emotionally heightened to melodrama, are essentially the same sorts of problems the people watching the movie were dealing with. They worry about having enough to pay the bills and take care of the kids. They grapple with jealousy and insecurity. They're just normal. But Vidor's camera gives them and their world a sense of grandeur. A frequently bleak sort of grandeur, but grandeur nonetheless. They're ordinary people, but they're important. Now, The Crowd belongs to the masses. Another of the greatest and most influential films ever made, Carl Theodor Dreyer's The Passion of Joan of Arc, is also now in the public domain. The film stars Renée Jean Falconetti as Joan of Arc, giving one of the definitive performances in all of cinema, but especially silent cinema. Celebrated for its stark compositions, severe high and low camera angles, and focus on the faces of its actors, particularly Falconetti, it is one of the most visually striking and emotionally powerful films you will ever see, and now it's in the public domain, so if you want to do like a redub of it, where Joan is a Florida public school teacher on trial for telling her students about the existence of trans people, you can do it and monetize it and everything. Two of the last silent pictures from two of the greatest artists of the silent era are also now in the public domain. The Cameraman, starring Buster Keaton, directed by Edward Sedgwick, the first film of Keaton's MGM contract, and the last truly great film he ever made. Buster stars as a photographer who spends his life savings on a film camera and chases a career as a newsreel cameraman in order to impress a girl who is also being wooed by another guy who is a successful cameraman. Classic Keaton plot, lots of funny gags, a few stunts, and a conclusion that manages to be both happy and end with Buster as the butt of a joke. It's not quite up to the level of Keaton's very best work, but it's still fantastic. And now it's yours, to use however you please, whether you know what to do with it or not, just like MGM did with Keaton himself. There's also The Circus, directed by and starring Charlie Chaplin, my problematic fave to end all problematic faves. Chaplin stars in his famous persona as the tramp who tries out for a circus, fails, but then gets hired anyway when the owner sees how his oblivious antics make the audience laugh. The Circus has all the brilliant physical comedy and pathos that you expect from a Chaplin silent feature, but it's not as well remembered as, say, The Gold Rush or City Lights, the films it was released between. Still, it's worth remembering. Funny, wistful, hopeful, with an iconic closing shot. Where would Chaplin documentaries and biopics be without this shot to end on? Am I right? Plus, it's technically Chaplin's last silent picture. His next two films, City Lights and Modern Times, were presented in the form of silent films with title cards and no dialogue, but they did have synchronized soundtracks with musical scores and sound effects. Like many of his other silent works, Chaplin did eventually write a musical score for The Circus and re-release it, but that version wasn't released until 1969, so only the original silent version of The Circus is public domain, not the score. If you want to sell your own version to grab your share of the incredibly lucrative silent film market in 2024, you'll have to compose your own music. Or, I don't know, see if Kevin MacLeod has anything that would work. So yeah, quite a crop this year, huh? Some truly impressive works entering the public domain this year. Works that are artistically accomplished, culturally significant, historically significant, produced by some of the creative giants of the 20th century. Burroughs, Christie, Lenny, Vidor, Veidt, Dreyer, Keaton, Chaplin. Yep. Also, Steamboat Willie. Yes, okay, fine. Obviously, the biggest deal out of all the works entering public domain this year is Steamboat Willie, the first appearance of Mickey Mouse, a copyright Disney was so determined to hold on to that they lobbied Congress successfully multiple times to rewrite the law to extend the copyright beyond its scheduled expiration date. Ever wondered why U.S. copyright law is so complicated and the term of a copyright here is so long compared to most other countries? It would be reductive to say it's all because of Disney, but I feel like that might be the right answer. Disney's push to hang on to the copyright for Mickey Mouse was so aggressive and so widely known that the last time U.S. copyright law was updated, in 1998, that law, the Copyright Term Extension Act, was nicknamed the Mickey Mouse Protection Act. But, like a rich old man in a sci-fi movie trying in vain to extend his life through legally, technologically, and morally dubious means, the Walt Disney Company now has to face the fact that the end is inevitable. Or in the words of a song that's been public domain since way before this year, you can run on for a long time, but sooner or later, God will cut you down. On today's episode, the part of God will be played by the Copyright Term Extension Act, because it giveth and it taketh away. Steamboat Willie and Mickey Mouse are finally in the public domain. Sort of. And maybe not really. It's complicated. The animated short Steamboat Willie is in the public domain. Its copyright term has lapsed. It's ours, baby. But it might not be all ours. Mickey Mouse the character still belongs to Disney because Disney owns a trademark on Mickey, and trademarks basically never expire as long as the owner continues to conduct business with them. So unless Disney just stops using Mickey Mouse for stuff, which I don't see happening, they own him until the sun incinerates the earth and possibly beyond. I haven't read the fine print. Now, ordinarily, even if a character is trademarked, once a work they are featured in becomes public domain, that version of the character also becomes public domain. That's why the makers of grim, witless, cynical cash-in horror movie Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey were able to produce that product, because even though Disney does have Winnie the Pooh trademarked, the original books are now public domain, which means you can make a Winnie the Pooh movie if you want, as long as it is only derived from works that are in the public domain. The same is true of other characters I mentioned earlier in this video, like Hercule Poirot or Tarzan. Those characters appear in some publications that are now in the public domain, and some that aren't. Anything derived from the public domain works is free and clear. Use it, adapt it, reinterpret it, remix it, whatever. But anything derived from later works that are not yet in the public domain would need to be done with permission from the rights holder, or else it would be in violation of copyright. This should mean that the original version of Mickey Mouse, as seen in Steamboat Willie, is public domain. Free to use. You can make that Steamboat Willie porn parody you've been keeping in your pocket, or at least that's what I think is in your pocket. And Bob Iger can't do shit about it. That certainly seems to be the opinion of the producers and legal advisors of Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, not the porn parody thing. They've just started using a mascot character based on the Steamboat Willie version of Mickey. I don't think John Oliver is going to produce a Steamboat Willie porn parody. Although, that show is on HBO. And I bet some of you have already thought of 5 or 6 filthy puns to use for the title. And I hope they're right. They've used the Steamboat Willie character a few times on the show, even before the copyright officially lapsed, and they seem to be getting away with it, so more power to them. And to anyone else who wants to take advantage of the original Mickey Mouse. Wait, I want to rephrase that. The only thing that might get in the way of people using the theoretically public domain Steamboat Willie version of Mickey is the fact that about 15 years ago, seeing the end of the copyright term approaching, then still but a speck on the distant horizon but drawing ever closer, Disney debuted a new logo for its animation studio. It's a 15-second cartoon of a flipbook depicting Mickey Mouse from Steamboat Willie. I'm sure it's trademarked. It's been in regular use since it was introduced. If Disney wanted to defend it by saying that someone using the likeness of Steamboat Willie Mickey Mouse without their permission is infringing on their established trademark, I don't know if they'd win, but I bet they wouldn't immediately get laughed out of court. So just be careful. The copyright status of Mickey Mouse, even first-generation Steamboat Willie Mickey Mouse, may not be as cut and dry as it appears, and I'd hate for you to find yourself on the other side of a fight with Disney. Unless you happen to be one of those Ron DeSantis types, in which case, I hope they fucking destroy you so utterly there's nothing left for the vultures or the hobos. Of course, in a better world, the hobos wouldn't need it. In the big rock candy mountains, you never change your socks, and the little streams of alcohol come a-trickling down the rocks. The brakemen have to tip their caps, and the railroad bulls are blind. There's a lake of stew and of whiskey, too. You can paddle all around 'em in a big canoe in the big rock candy mountains.